Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Guiding Light, where we invite you to follow the peace in your life. I'm Jenna Carson,
I'm Sierra Larson.
and today we are so fortunate to be joined by our special guest, Kamden Hainsworth. Welcome, Kamden.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. This is awesome.
Kamden is a certified ADHD coach, podcast host, and faith-based educator passionate about helping individuals understand the deep connection between how their brain works and how their faith works. She earned her BA in elementary education from Brigham Young University and began her professional journey in the classroom before pivoting into entrepreneurship and personal development, a path that ultimately led her to ADHD diagnosis at age 36. With over 1,000 hours of coaching experience, Kamden has supported individuals from a wide range of backgrounds all over the world. She is the host of the Busy Brained Saint podcast and founder of Mindful, a small group ADHD coaching program. Kamden grew up in San Diego, California, and now lives in Springville, Utah, with her husband and their four daughters, including children with ADHD. She finds joy in leading children's music worship at church, coaching her daughter's soccer team, and DIYing around her home.
Yes.
So, Kamden, you were diagnosed with ADHD at age 36.
That's right.
And this is becoming, I think, more and more common, which is great because a lot of us adults are realizing more what's going on in our brains as technology and research is, progressing. And I would love to ask you, for those of us who are still wondering, what exactly is ADHD? What is it and what is it not?
Awesome. Perfect place to start. Uh, ADHD is a neurodevelopmental disorder. And science would tell us that it's underdevelopment of the prefrontal cortex. And the prefrontal cortex is what helps us with all of our higher level thinking, right? It's essentially what makes kind of differentiates us from a lot of living creatures in this world. Um, and so it is responsible for executive function. It's responsible for systems and ideas like prioritization, time management, emotional management, regulation of all sorts and shapes and sizes. And so if we can think about that prefrontal cortex being developed differently, which might be a little bit more neutral way of talking about it, compared to a neurotypical, we struggle with executive function. We struggle with regulation, for example, of dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, all of those neurotransmitters that really make a human tick, allow us to execute, allow us to be successful in terms of neurotypical society as we know it. What it, and I have the personal belief that it is a disability, that it is something that people, if they sweep underneath the rug and don't take care of, will definitely get in the way of their progress. But like all disabilities, that doesn't mean that we're doomed. We can still have very, very fulfilling lives, but it does at least highlight the areas of my life where I can rely upon my brain to not show up for me in particular ways. And so, in order to manage those areas of the brain, I create external tools. I create other systems that help me be more successful. So, what ADHD is not is just a lack of attention. What it is not is something separate than mental health. ADHD impacts mental health a lot. What it is not is a doomsday sentence either. There's so many beautiful things about the creative mind that comes from ADHD as well. It's not something that just impacts 8-year-old white little boys. It is something that impacts a very wide variety of humans across all continents and across the world. And it is not what maybe a lot of our parents perceived or thought it was when they saw just these rambunctious little kids bouncing off, the walls, nor is it something that we necessarily grow out of. It is something that stays with us and remains with us for a long time.
Thank you so much for laying that out. I'm feeling some strong personal emotion as I hear this because my father was ADHD, diagnosed with ADHD later in life, and I'm just, my heart is having a little bit more empathy and compassion for him as I hear you speak, because I think growing up there was a lot of judgment on my part, like, why can't you do X, Y, Z? I don't understand,
Yeah,
and I think he wasn't getting the mental health help that he needed. And so I just appreciate you talking about the reality of this. It's not just people choosing not to pay attention.
that's right. It's not just people choosing to be lazy or not get things done or showing up late all the time. Yeah, it's certainly not for a lack of trying.
I want to
Yeah.
ask you about what you said about 8-year-old little boys in school. I think as someone with little nephews, I think a lot about how school systems don't seem to be built for boys. And I think there's research that talks about this. But how do we discern whether a child is simply having, typical,
Adolescents,
yeah,
underdeveloped brains.
yeah,
Yeah.
versus ADHD? Yeah.
Yeah, you know, there's not an easy answer for that, but one of the answers that I give is notice, like especially as mothers, as parents, I do feel like we have like an intuition, an understanding of our kids, and a godly view on them. It's not perfect, but I do feel like that we have been given certain gifts, so I lean into that a lot. Of like, something seems maybe just a little bit extra, or something seems a little bit off. Not the anxiety speaking, but if the heart's speaking to you. That is not scientific, but I do think that it matters. I will often say to my clients, who either have recently been diagnosed or they're coming to me for help when they talk about their kids, is is their behavior getting in the way of them performing things that you know they're capable of? Do you see do you see that there's an imbalance between their success rates and things that they're really interested in versus things that they're less interested in? Are you seeing inconsistencies in school? Are you seeing inconsistencies in the broader realm of life where they're extremely talented in one area, but for some reason they're unable to tap in the same way in other areas? And with ADHD, we do have this interest driven brain. And so knowing and understanding that can maybe highlight, oh my gosh, yeah, they're so successful in this area, or they just could work for 4 hours without even blinking in this one area. But when I ask them to pick up their room, do homework, when it's time to transition into, let's say, math, for example, or something during school, they completely melt down, they dysregulate. If that is getting in the way of how they are experiencing life, living a fulfilled life to a degree that if they got a little bit more support and help, you feel like it would actually increase their life satisfaction and the way that they experience life in general, then I would say definitely go look at the DSM-5 and look at all the different aspects of the DSM-5 and start to maybe talk to your pediatrician about that. We're talking specifically for kids right now, but yeah,
Yeah. I'm curious though too because I'm thinking more for little girls because I know it
it's a
presents
different
different.
conversation. Yeah.
It's a totally different
Uh-huh.
conversation because I had undiagnosed ADHD my whole life and I did great in school.
Yeah.
I my biggest thing in school is I wouldn't stop talking. And so
Uh-huh. I
they were
love
like,
that.
maybe if I put you like right next to the teacher, you'll stop talking. And I'm like, nope, I just talk to
Chat
the
with
teacher
them.
all day. Like, I don't care who you put me next to.
Yeah.
And so, but I did great in school. I got good grades. I have 2 master's degrees. Like I love school.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious how that shows up for girls and why in especially little girls it's getting kind of underlooked and
Yeah.
underdiagnosed.
Yeah, thank you so much. It is a whole different conversation. Same thing. I mean, I was nearly a straight A student. School actually was always very difficult for me, but I'm very gritty and determined. And so, I did just fine in school. I became a teacher for a reason. And then we have like people probably like yourself that you may have been involved in like the exceptional programs or GATE programs. We call that twice exceptional. So you're neurodivergent and you have a high IQ. And so that's really a really interesting combo, but it actually happens quite a bit within the ADHD community and neurodivergent community as a whole. But to get more specific on gender. I have ADHD, so I wrote some notes to make sure that I pointed to the most important aspects. Um, let's just think of women and hormones in general. Okay, I know you were probably talking about elementary school with your nephews, right, Jenna and Sierra. When were you diagnosed, Sierra, if you don't mind me asking?
After my third daughter or third child, so my
Okay,
daughter,
yeah,
yeah.
So 2 years
yeah.
So
ago, Sierra, is that
yeah,
two
she'll be
years?
two next week. So yeah, 2 years ago.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
awesome. So one of the reasons why is that it just does manifest differently in girls. It's going to be a lot more of the inattention sometimes. Your hyperactivity came out with talking,
Hmm.
right? And that's a form of regulation. So when kids are being hyperactive, when they're moving their bodies, they're trying to regulate. I kind of feel like if you had like some kind of someone was like tickling you from the inside out, right? Like trying not to squirm like is impossible. But when we squirm our body and we move, it balances almost like that tickling feeling in our body. It distracts us from it, it regulates us. And actually, right before this podcast, I was feeling a little bit not dysregulated, but a little bit more on the anxious side of my ADHD. And so I had my guitar here. I played the guitar and I sang because the voice can regulate a body. So when you're talking about the talking or when you're talking about the daydreaming with girls, when you're talking about they are incredible maskers. So if it looks like they're paying attention, but you go over to them and they're doing science and they still have no idea what mitochondria is, and it's been like the fourth day of review, like picking up on these types of things. Also, if they're having to read the same page 18 times because their mind is wandering and drifting, these are all quiet ways that ADHD can manifest. And I'm just going to bring up a little bit more of like society and how they expect women to show up. um, we just mask naturally. We follow the models that are around us, and I'm glad to see that there are changes in the world and in particular in our nation. And I'm not trying to take away womanhood in general, but we're shown to act a certain way. And so if we are really good at masking, we're really good at pretending, we're really good at reading unofficial cues from people because we're constantly trying to read the room, then we're going to show up like we're paying attention, we're getting our work done. But then our test scores aren't going to show it. And it's going to be like this big question mark. So if you're seeing once again an inconsistency on what you're seeing versus the performance, then don't just let that pass by. Don't just keep saying, work harder or try harder. Really start advocating for them. It's my daughter just went and got tested, and we found out some really interesting things about how her brain works. And it has been really beneficial. She's in fifth grade right now too, just to know what we're working with. But then when we go through puberty, now we have the menstrual cycle. Estrogen levels highly, highly impact dopamine levels. And so, in addition to all of the cycles, all of the different parts of our menstrual cycle and the fluctuations in our hormones, in addition to that, we're going to get the massive brain fog. We're going to get the incredible emotional dysregulation and the quote unquote moodiness, but like times 10. Okay. It's just going to be almost sometimes it pushes people into the PMDD diagnosis, which is very you just feel like a whole different person before the bleeding starts of your menstrual cycle too. And that's because it is highly, highly impacting the dopamine and other neurotransmitter levels in your body. And then, of course, we go through menopause and we have children, and all of that is a part of this impact. So there's a lot of other, podcasts you can go to find out more information about that. But I'm just looking to make sure I have everything. The coexisting conditions that can come with like depression and anxiety and ADHD sometimes. Women were much higher to be highly diagnosed with anxiety than they were with ADHD for many years. So that answers, was it your question, Jenna or Sierra? I can't remember which. Sierra asked the original question, but like, why so many years were women not being
Yeah.
diagnosed and now they
Yeah.
are, right? Is because they're being misdiagnosed a lot of the time, in addition to the masking, right? Oh, she's just a daydreamer. Oh, she's just a little flighty, right? We've heard things like that. Well, no, it's actually clinical. Like, there's something going on in the brain. But in addition to that, uh, what was I saying? There's my ADHD moment. Oh my heaven, that is so funny.
It's okay.
No, no, no. Oh, sorry.
Women being diagnosed.
Co-diagnoses, okay? Comorbidities is what they call it. It's a beautiful name, comorbid. But they were being diagnosed with anxiety a lot more, okay? And this was stemming not from necessarily trauma, though a lot of us do have trauma or PTSD, but this anxiety was because we didn't know what to do first. Everything in our life felt like it was on fire all at once, and we couldn't choose where to begin. Analysis paralysis was real when you have that problem. Emotional dysregulation, right? We're feeling this intense, deep sense of rejection a lot that comes with rejection sensitivity. And what is that leading us toward? Anxiety, symptoms of anxiety, depression, symptoms of depression, right? But it's actually stemming not from where a lot of depression and anxiety, like generalized anxiety, is coming from, but it's coming from undiagnosed ADHD. And so there have been a plethora of women within the last 10, 15 years that in being diagnosed with ADHD and treated, all of a sudden their anxiety is better. They no longer have the generalized anxiety diagnosis. It was an ADHD diagnosis once treated. Wow, now they feel like, okay, I got a handle of my life.
This
Oh my
is
goodness.
blowing my mind right now.
Oh, good,
I'm
good. I love
like, I
it.
need to go get tested tomorrow, I'm like, actually, I was tested in grad school, and the neurologist who did the testing was like, I can't really say one way or the other. You'd have to get more testing. But this is just sounding, whoa, this sounds like me.
Wow, I'm so
Yeah.
glad. I hope that it's
Yeah.
informative. And you're not alone. I can't
Yeah.
tell you the number of women that once I talk about this, they start to see themselves. And you're in a creative space right now too. Like as podcasters, as entrepreneurs, double master's degrees, like this is what we do.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm not saying you have ADHD,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
also the community at large that I work with do worse. Like we are looking for the next dopamine. We are looking, we're driven, we're excited, we're the creative minds. We do this type of stuff. And so it's fun to, you're not the first person that said that,
Yeah.
it's just fun to connect with women in that way.
Wow. Yeah. And it makes me feel less, um, I don't want to use the word crazy because I don't love that word, but I
Yeah.
feel so weird in that luteal phase before bleeding. I do, like you said, you feel like a different person. I'm like, who am I? Who is this monster that came to
Yeah.
reside in my body? Like, I'm so confused. And why the rejection sensitivity, like, whoa, it's so interesting. So I want to ask you, Camden, for other people, and it doesn't have to be just women, but other people listening to this right now thinking, maybe I should get tested, but I feel scared. I don't want to have to be on meds. Can you
Sure.
just give us a little insight into what it might look like to get tested and then what treatment might look like just to kind of make it less scary for us?
Of course. Well, I'll start with the medication route. I have mostly never been medicated for my ADHD. I have tried, we're now on the ninth medication um, over the past 5 years since my diagnosis. And this one is actually, I think it's going to work. I think that it's worth it. Most all the other ones have had bad side effects. And so for most of the time, and this is just within the last year that we've like intentionally been doing medication, it's all been natural treatment. So supplementation, making sure I'm getting good sleep, exercise, coaching, therapy, good books, podcasts. It's been much more of a natural route. Now, mind you, my 11-year-old has been so severely hyperactive and in need of medication since she was very, very young for safety reasons. And so in that case, like I am on both sides, I'm in both camps here. So there's many ways to take care of yourself with ADHD. So I'll just kind of say that out front. Next is I started just with a neuropsychiatrist and an NP. He was an NP in neuropsychiatry. And I think we did 2 sessions together. And I just talked about how this is what I always tell new clientele that haven't had an official diagnosis. Take the DSM-5. So you just go right in DSM and then a V. Okay. ADHD. Unfortunately, this was more made for adolescents, for kids, but you're going to be able to apply it to your own life. You're very creative. And I want you to take it line by line if possible and write down line by line. So if it says, um, like inattention, okay, write down the times that you notice. I'm 41, as a 41-year-old, that your inattention is getting in the way of you having a well balanced life. Emotional dysregulation. Where are you seeing emotional dysregulation? You're just going to note down particular instances where you're feeling these areas. And then, as you guys have already seen, when you're put on the spot by your neuropsychiatrist, they're asking you these questions. Now you have a beautiful list. You can feel prepared. You can feel like, I don't know, because that's another part with working memory with ADHD is like grabbing it from our working memory and bringing it top of mind. Word recall is really hard. All of those things are impacted. Sierra, I love seeing your face. It's all highly impacted. So a lot of the time we struggle in those very pointed discussions about ADHD because our brain doesn't show up for us like that. Um, so that's what I say, neuropsychiatrist, ideally. Otherwise, if you're working with a therapist, they might have a recommendation. A general doctor is just fine too. If you go see a PA regularly, any of those people would be able to help you if you consider yourself. But I would say with people with ADHD, especially as adults, we can advocate for ourselves. My first experience, I just want to put this out there too. My first experience going to the doctor, I'd already been advocating for about 9 months for the ADHD community without an official diagnosis. I knew I had ADHD. I had done all the research, thousands and thousands of hours. Um, and essentially, I went in and she just said, I can't help you.
Mm.
It's the wrong person. I can't do anything for you. And I left bawling my eyes out. I left with so much rejection, with so much insecurity. Come to find out, I did complain and kindly, but I complained. And she was actually leaving the practice. Probably bedside manner wasn't great. But my second person that I met with was this nurse practitioner in neuropsychiatry, and he was awesome. And now I'm working with the second, and he is equally as awesome. So continue to push, and it's going to feel very boring and very hard and very understimulating and overwhelming at the same time to do all of this work. Don't let that get in the way. Okay, power through. It is, for me, well worth getting that information because when we know what we're working with, we can know how to help ourselves better. And that there might be a grief attached to that about not finding out earlier. There might be some hard feelings, some mixed feelings. You're totally normal if that's the case. But for me, it has been eye-opening and life-changing, obviously enough for me to change my entire career path to advocating for people with ADHD.
Yeah, I love that. I just feel so seen. I just think that's awesome. Especially the words don't come to you because sometimes if you've listened to this podcast for long enough, you're like, Sierra, just spit it out. But
Yeah.
sometimes the words just don't come. But I love that you mentioned when you're in process of getting a diagnosis and getting treatment, it can be so difficult because
Yeah.
it takes so much executive functioning to get a doctor, to make the phone call, get a doctor, get the prescription. By the time you get the prescription, and then there's like a shortage, and then
Yes.
you have to
Mhm.
go back to the doctor, get a new prescription for another pharmacy. It's like there's so much to
Yeah.
do to get the help that you need. And that's just for this diagnosis. And if you have any other health things, it's just like so much to do.
It
So I
is.
love that you said that. One thing that I think really helps with that is utilizing patient advocates. I've like recently learned to use a patient advocate with the health group that I'm working with, and they have been
Wow.
incredible of just helping get appointments scheduled, connecting you with doctors and all sorts of things. So there are people that can really help with getting you uh, the the help, the appointments and things that you need
Yeah.
and coordinating. So there are resources for that too that I just want to make people aware of.
Yeah. Thanks, Sarah. That's huge. My mentor this past week was just like, the fact that we are still expecting people with ADHD to go through the process to get their medication is unreal. So I'm so happy that you found that. In addition, I would just suggest like it's okay to call a friend. Like if you have a close friend or if you have a spouse or if you have a sister or someone and just say, "Can you sit on the line and body double with me? I have to make this appointment. It's going to take about 45 minutes. You can do your laundry. I just need you to be on the line so I can be accountable and follow along." Body doubling is huge in that way. Um, and it really does work. It really does work. We follow each other's momentum. So whether it's in network to have that advocate or it's somebody that you can reach out to, don't hesitate.